In this session we're going to look at making a basic calculator that when it's running we'll be able to easily enter in one number, enter in another number. When we press add, they'll add and give us the answer. Otherwise, when we can later develop to subtract, divide or times. And when we hit the reset, it clears out all these boxes. So let's have a look at how we create this. In this program we've got the main program, Calc HTML. Also we'll be using a script called Calc2, which will make a link to our external JavaScript file. The design uses a table. We've also had a div for main area if we want to style it. And as we go through, we've actually got a table that we've created, and this is a simple table. If we go back to live view, it's basically 2 rows with 3 columns. We've merged the bottom 2 columns here, placed the 4 buttons in with the reset button, 2 text boxes for num1, num2, an equal sign just placed in this box here. We haven't centered it or anything like that. So if we go into design view, we can easily do that by highlighting that, bring up the properties window, and stylizing that to center, and also an answer text box. We can see that when we go back into our code. We've got text num1, text num2, and text answer. We have the plus sign, the minus sign, the divide, the times, and also the last button is a reset. And now we can actually develop the code to run this program. One of the main things we need to do is actually give the onClick functions for our buttons. So if we actually click F or the add button, here you can actually see the add symbol. We'll run a function called fadd. If we click subtract, there's going to be a onClick function that we call fsubtract. Also the divide, we could actually put an onClick, and also for the times we'd have onClick. But I'm going to be mainly dealing with the add button in this session, and you can do the others, and also the reset one. So I'm going to just deal with add and reset. So let's go across to our code and develop our code. The first thing we need to do is declare our function. So we've got function add, bracket, bracket, with an open brace and a closed brace, and also reset, bracket, bracket, with the open and closed brace. Now, as we said before, this marries up with the onClick for reset down here, fReset, and also up here for fadd. So let's start with the add function. One of the first things we need to do is actually do our variables. So these are our variables. Now when we take information in from the GUI, we need to store it somewhere. So the 2 things we need to bring in is num1 and num2, and we need to store that somewhere, and also we need a 3rd variable to store the answer so we can output that later to the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is declare a variable, and I'm going to call it nnum1 for a variable, and it's num1, and its little n at the front indicates that this is going to hold a number. We're going to also have nnum2, and we need var nas, and this is where all the variables be stored. The next thing we need to do is get our input. So this is taken from the GUI. But before we go any further, I'm just going to put in an alert tag in here and say in add. There's no use going any further in our program, because if we're not calling the fadd program, there's no need to code any further. So let's just save this with the command S, and then go to the live view. And the idea is if I click on this add symbol, it should call the function, and it says in add. So I know now that that function call is working. So we know that we're coming into here. So now I'm just going to rem this out, and I'm just going to move this at the moment. I'm just going to place it right above here, and that's just one of our checks, and you should do that when we first come in. I'm going to paste it down here as well. I'm just going to remove this at the moment and just put in reset. And we're going to check that reset's working as well. So let's just quickly go back to live view, refresh live view. This one that should say we're in add. Hang on a second. We've actually remmed that out, so I won't say that. But if I click on this one here, it says in reset, so we know that it's working. So let's go back to our code. So we know that working, and we've actually declared the variable, so let's get the input from the GUI. To do this, we're going to put it in num1. So think of a variable area in the memory being opened up like a bucket. It's called num1. We're going to place something in there. So what we're going to place in there is the contents of this text box here. This text box is actually called, if I go back to my source, txt num1. I'm just going to highlight that at the moment. So we want to get the information from that text box. So we've got to go document dot get element by ID. Now what this is saying is the document, which is the main web page, get element by ID, we want to get the txt num1. But what do we actually want to get from that? Well, we actually want to get the dot value. Because if we just have txt num1, it'll actually take all the properties, including the border color, all the XY position, and store that in this variable. But what we actually want is just the value of that. Now we want to check that that's working, so we're just going to alert, and we're going to put n num1 to check that we're getting that information from the GUI. I've just saved that. We'll go back to live view, refresh. I'm going to put the number 22 in there and click on add. And 22's come up in our alert tag, which means we're collecting the information correctly. So now I'm just going to rem that out and move on. We know that we've got the information from num1, so let's do the same thing for num2. So I'm just going to copy that down and change that to a 2. That's why using sort of naming conventions do make your life easier. So once again, this time rather than alert just num1, we're going to concatenate, put a plus in, put a space in between the two numbers, and I'm going to have num2. So this should display num1, num2 together. Save that and go to live view, refresh. I'm going to put 2 here and put 3 here. Click on add, and you see the 2 space 3. So we're getting both inputs correctly. So that's working well. So once again, rem that out. Now I've got the two numbers, I now want to add them together. So I'm going to go n answer. So the result of the processing, put it in n answer. And what I want to do is put n num1 plus n num2. And once I've done that, I then want to alert n answer. And we'll see what happens this time. You'll notice that it does something a little bit different and unexpected. So we just refresh the page. I'm going to put 2 in there and put 3 in there. If I add them together, I really should get 5. Let's have a look at what we get. I actually get 23, a 2 and a 3. And that's because we're taking information from a text box, and this is also a text box. And when we add them together, it's putting the text number against another text number. So the 2 is sitting next to a 3. So what we need to do is actually turn these into integers, numbers that we can actually work with. To do that, we're going to place this in a bracket, and we're going to run a function on this, or a process on this, called parseInt. So take the number, or the text number that comes in through this value, convert it, pass it to an integer, and then store it. And we're going to do the same thing here. So we want to also parseInt that. So let's run the program now and have a look at what happens. Refresh, we'll put a 2 in and a 3 in, add them together, we now get 5. So it's taken the text 2, the chart 2, turned it into an integer, 3, turned it to an integer, added them together and displayed it. Now the good thing about this is once we've completed this process, we've actually completed the processing part, which is just here. So if I want to do subtraction, all I've got to do is replicate this function, call it f_subtract, and put a minus sign in here now, and that will be for multiplication, division as well. And then you can expand on this. Now at the moment we're only alerting into an alert box, but we actually want to put it back to the screen. So this is going to become our output. So this is where we're going to output this to the screen. To do this, once again, we need to target the area on the desktop or on our web page, which is this text box here. That text box, if we look at the code, it's actually called txt answer, txt ans. So that's the one we need to target. So we're going to use the same getElementById, and we want to use the value because we want to talk to the text part of that text box, which is its value, but it's called txt ans. But what we want to do is make that text part the answer. So we're going to put in here NANS. So take this number answer, place it in the value part of this element that resides on the main page on the document. So let's save this, and this time when we run the program, when I put a 2 in here and a 3 in here, and click the plus sign, the answer actually comes out in the answer area as 5 over here. So that is adding our numbers together. If I want to do subtraction, all I really need to do now is take this whole procedure, so that means from the close brace right up to the function, copy that, go down, paste that. Now I'm just going to put sub in here, SUB, for subtraction. I'm going to change the addition to minus, and then on our source code, make sure that the subtraction event listener onClick F subtract, I just call it SUB, so I'm just going to change that back to SUB. Save that, go to live view, refresh. I'm going to put 6 and 2, so 6 is the first number, 2 is the second. When I add them together I should get 8. When I click on subtract I get 4. So that's working perfectly, and if I wanted to we could change 2 to 21 and click subtract, and you notice it also deals with negative numbers as well, and it also would deal with rational numbers like 0.5, etc. So that's how you can easily do that. But how do we get our reset to actually clear this out? Well, that's a fairly simple process now that we've got this all set up. We'll go back to our JavaScript, and in reset, much the same way as we've actually put the answer out, what we can do in here, and I'll just use the answer to start with, and I'll just go back to the code view, run the split view. So rather than the value of answer being the answer this time, what I want it to be is just nothing. So I've just got a open quote, close quote with nothing in between, so that should blank out the answer. If I want to change num1, num2, the text boxes, I can replicate this, and I'll just put this above, and again, and just tell it which element I want to make blank. So in this case here, num1 and num2. Save this, go to live view, refresh. So if I put a number in here like 2 and a number in here like 2, click add, subtract, reset, and they all blank. Now just to get rid of that last alert symbol, all you've got to do is just take out this one here with the comment tag, and now our program should work freely and correctly as we want. So just to run this in a browser, once again I can put 6, 2, add together, subtract, reset, and now you can just do the divide and times. So I hope that helps you understand getElementById and how to use function calls with an onClick.